Lubricating keyboard switches isn't as difficult as you think. It does look a bit daunting at first if you aren't too familiar with it. You may end up ruining some switches while you get comfortable doing it. And even then, that doesn't guarantee consistency. Well, this episode isn't just a how-to lube tutorial, but we'll also talk about how keyboard switches work, what tools you need, and of course, how to lube switches. So, let's go. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if it's your first time. I'm Marvin Gray, and in this video we'll talk about lubing keyboard switches. As you know, this hobby is quite meticulous, especially on maintaining the components of a keyboard. Enthusiasts factor in acoustics, feel, usability, collectability, and lastly, cost. So in terms of maximizing the hobby experience, it's always recommended to start delving into it by lubricating your switches, or for short, lubing. The goal of lubing is to create a smoother, better sounding switch. Modders usually do this to remove the scratchiness of the switch, which is the friction between the stem or slider and the housing. Lubing along with filming can also improve acoustics and reduce housing wobble for a smoother typing experience. Now, lubing in itself may sound simple, but coupled with the information about types of lubes and types of switches, it can look overwhelming to beginners. So let's take some time and understand what a switch is and how it works. In this video, we'll talk about the most common type of switch, which is called an MX style switch, and these are modeled to the original Cherry MX design. A switch has several components: the stem or slider, the top housing, the bottom housing, the leaf, and the spring. So the way it goes is that when a key press is done, it sends out force, which then pushes the stem down to touch the leaf, which then registers the key press, and that results to a character displayed on the screen, provided that there is an active connection from the switch to wires or a PCB to a PC. There are three types of switches: linear, tactile, and clicky. Now, we won't talk too much about these things, but maybe in a future episode. Okay, so now that you know the components of the switch and how it works, I guess it's fair to know why we even bother lubing these switches, right? Well, modding is a common term you'll see in the keyboard community, and the first mod you can do for your keyboard is to lube the switches and the stabilizers or stabs to make them smoother and eliminate scratchiness when you press them. This improves the feel and the acoustics of the switch, therefore improving the overall typing experience. And psychologically, it gives you a feel that your keyboard is somewhat upgraded, right? While we're on the topic of mods, another add-on you can include when you lube your switches is to add switch films. Switch films are small plastic or rubber cuts like these, and are sandwiched between the top and bottom housing. Its purpose is to reduce housing wobble and slightly improves the sound of the switch. It's very cheap and an indispensable addition to your mod. Now, before we proceed to lubing, I'd like to thank Justin's Mechanical Keyboards for sponsoring today's video. JMK is a local mechanical keyboard enthusiast shop that provides a wide variety of keyboard mod supplies. Established in 2019, they started selling switches and then began expanding to other keyboard supplies, from springs to lubricants to switch films. I'll put their shop links in the description. Alright, let's talk about what you need to lube a switch. Of course, you need switches. You also need a switch lubricant and a switch opener, or a flathead screwdriver if you don't have a switch opener. But I highly recommend you invest in one. This cuts down a lot of time on disassembly. And a paintbrush. I don't have a preference, but you may want to get a small size paintbrush. The optional tools are switch films, a claw pickup tool which is used to grab the stem for easier lubing, a lubing station, at least 4 containers if you're the type that separates switch components for faster lubing. There are many types of lubricants out there, but we can classify them into 2 types: oil and grease. Grease is generally formed by adding a thickener powder to oil. Grease and oil are classified based on viscosity or thickness. Now, both are classified further by NLGI grade, which determines the fluidity. NLGI stands for National Lubricating Grease Institute. Now, you'll see names like Krytox or Turbosis along with numbers, but they're just brands that have their own numbering. For the purpose of this video, let's use Krytox, which is much more popular and available. The common Krytox products we see and read in the modding hobby are numbered based on its base oil viscosity. The lower the number, the less viscous it is. So for example, 203 is less viscous than 204, which is in turn less viscous than 205, and so on. To give more context without being too technical, the NLGI grade starts from grade 000 to 6. 000 is similar to the fluidity of ketchup, while the popular grade 0 is similar to the fluidity of mustard. While viscosity is often referred to as thickness, grades determine the fluidity or stiffness of the lubricant. Also, Krytox numbers the oil starting by 10x and 20x for the grease. Based on observation, the most common greases and oils used in our community seem to be 104, 105, 106, 203, 204, and 205. Now, what I've learned is that the type of lube really depends on your preference. The general guideline people gave me when starting out is that you use the more viscous lubes for linear switches and then scale down to a lower viscosity for tactiles. So let's begin. The most basic way to do it is to use a switch opener, disassemble the switch, lube the bottom housing, lube the spring, and put a switch film on top of the bottom housing. Then proceed with lubing the stem. For linears, you can lube all around, but for tactiles and clickies, they don't advise to lube the legs or the jacket because it reduces tactility and eliminates the clicky sound. Again, it's completely based on your preference. You can test out with several switches to see what works for you. Once done, you can put the stem on top of the spring and close the loop by putting the top housing on top of the bottom housing with all the components in. And that's it. Alright, so now that you have some idea about lubes, let's go ahead and start lubing switches. Okay, so let's start lubing switches. First, you take the switch. Use a switch opener or a flathead screwdriver. All you need to do is put it on a switch opener and press down. And then the switch will be disassembled really easy. Okay, so the first thing I do is I take out the bottom housing and get some really small amount of lube. Then I lube this part. This is where the stem goes in contact. And the other part. And then I just take some excess and do a circular motion where the spring goes. And then you're done lubing the bottom housing. Then you get spring. Right? Just put some lube there. Okay, and then all you need to do is put the spring on top of the bottom housing. And then if you want to add switch films, you can add switch films. Alright, so I usually use anti-static tweezers to put the switch films. You can use this by hand, you can do this by hand, but it's just really difficult to do it by hand, especially if you have fat fingers. Okay, so we're good. We have the switch film on, and then you take this one, and then you start lubing the stem. I lube all around where there's contact with the housing. Okay, I lube this as well. So for linears, I lube the legs as well. For tactiles and clickies, People don't lube them, but I lube them. But you have to test it, and it's really based on your preference. So sometimes if the tactility is too strong for me, I lube the legs. If it's not, I don't lube the legs. Okay, so once this is done, and the final touch is to put the top housing on, and this is it. Simple. That's how you lube a switch. For springs, you can opt to use grease, but it's much more efficient to use oil. You can use a plastic sealable bag, put a small amount of oil, and then put all the springs inside. And then shake it. And we're done. Easy, right? Now let's do this 80 more times, or maybe 60. Now this exercise can take hours, especially if it's your first time and you're lubing switches for a bigger layout. So make sure you take out your headset, put on a good playlist, and just chill. Alright, so that's it. I hope this helps get you started in modding your keyboard. I hope this video was helpful. If you like this video, hit that like button and that sub button to get notified when I upload new content. If you have other suggestions about videos you'd like to see, let me know in the comments. Again, I'm Marvin Gray, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.